Okay, we'll switch it over
We'll find
then.
something new.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello, we're
Talking
live.
about-
Sorry, guys. I was having a lot of technical difficulties, it looks like. But you guys can hear me okay? You guys can see me okay, right? On the panel? Perfect?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good. And then in the chat, also let us know if you can hear us okay or see us okay. Appreciate you guys waiting. I was having a lot of mic difficulties. I had to uninstall the driver and reinstall it and reset it up from the beginning. So I don't even know why I had to do that, but I had to do that. So it is
Well, the
what it
level
is.
sounds much better now, so that's good.
Okay, good. Thank goodness. Okay. Farzad fashionably late. Yes, let's just call it that. How about let's just say that's the case. All right. So community forum time. These are, for those that are not familiar, these are very free flowing conversations about anything that's happening in the Tesla Elon world. And in the comment section, definitely add your commentary, questions, comments, whatever you think, whatever you want to add to the conversation. And then we'll use the panel to drive a bunch of different discussions. Maybe we'll have since we haven't had Andreas on for a little bit, did you want to kick us off with sort of what was front of mind in your head, and then we'll take it from there and see where the conversation goes? How's that sound?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So sure. I wasn't quite expecting to be thrown in the deep end, and I haven't been on for a while. And as I was mentioning earlier, that easy to fall into the trap of feeling the imposter syndrome, because whilst
I only did this because I knew you said that.
yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, thanks for that. Really, yeah.
We punish vulnerability here.
Yes.
Clearly, yeah.
It's true.
It doesn't break you; it makes you stronger, right?
That's right.
So I've lost my train of thought now. No, I mean, just to pick up on that point, it's interesting because in other forums, there's no question that, like I can hold my own having a Tesla discussion, whereas amongst this forum, and especially including the comments and whoever's listening, it's very easy and justifiable perhaps to feel the imposter syndrome. So whilst I feel like the respect of the community, right? You got to really respect the community, and you got to take what you say quite responsibly and be very thoughtful about it. So that is, I suppose that's one point I'd want to make. I know, Farzad, you mentioned let's keep today very much impromptu. Let's not do too much preparation. That led me to think through some preparation, though, and
reverse psychology.
What I was thinking about is a topic that we'd mentioned, you and I had mentioned before in the past, which is how do you stay objective? And being a Tesla fan, you listen to obviously it's very easy to get all the Tesla news and the bull case, but how do you stay objective, and how do you listen to the bear case? And my thinking's evolved quite a lot around that. And in many respects, I've come to the conclusion that I'm less interested in the bear case from third parties, because I think it's very difficult to find credible sources that provide a bear case. In fact, it's probably easier to work out the bear case amongst the community itself, amongst the experts itself. I think we're in a much better position to understand the vulnerabilities and the risks within Tesla than relying on actually less informed individuals. And as long as we put the right hat on and we try and detach ourselves and put ourselves in the right space, we can actually do a much better job around thinking through both sides of the fence, right? And I was just thinking it'd be a nice thought exercise or a nice exercise to go through, where someone, perhaps one of us, plays or collectively plays devil advocate and tries to flesh out the bear case, and we have a discussion around each specific point, right? So almost like a simulated discussion around that.
I love that.
So that was a thought. Well, let me pause there.
I love that. So we're all going to put our Tesla bear hats on, knowing what we know about the company, and see if we can come to a situation where we identify the true bear cases or the true bear talking points that would really apply to Tesla versus what the Tesla self-proclaimed Tesla bears are actually throwing out there today. I just want to understand that's the exercise we're going to go through. Is that what you're proposing?
It's a thought. It's a
Okay,
thought.
I love
I'm
it.
Just throwing it
Yeah.
out there.
I love it. So what comes to mind immediately is the real bear talking points, I think, are not really, like, I'm trying to separate Tesla execution and macro, right? So and the one thing I'm really trying to, and then put that within the context of, are we talking about long-term price targets? Are we talking about short-term price targets? So to me, the real bear talking points, in my opinion, I'm obviously, let's open this up to the entire panel, where my head goes is China relationships is one potential bear point that we would have to talk about. Elon's health is another one. Those are the two that are coming to mind right now, and I keep thinking through it. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I'd add
Yeah,
some.
if you mention China,
Go ahead, Kuba.
yeah, if you mention China, we also have to mention Germany, because Germany has a tough winter ahead, being cut off possibly from gas from Russia, and it might really reflect badly on Giga Berlin.
And then 4680 ramp is definitely, I would think of it, instead of bear case, just like an honest SWOT assessment. Like, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for Tesla right now? And then, I totally agree with you, Andres, as far as it's hard to find people who are in the quote unquote bear community who can give you an honest, objective assessment of that, because they either don't look at the data authentically, or they come with some preconceived understandings that make them unable to interpret the data in front of them. And so, you almost do have to do that from inside the community. But thankfully, we really do have some great community resources who are good at objectively looking at the data. And so, first and foremost would be Rob. Like, he's so fair-minded about the way that he analyzes the data, Tesla, and tracks the news. So I feel like that is a huge win for the community. And then, the other one that comes to mind is Gary Black, that, he's going to be someone who tempers a lot of the hyperbole cases. He's going to jump in Farzad's thread and tell him that he's detached from reality real quick.
He did.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all saw that. Let me actually put that up, because that was a hilarious thing that happened. But I started the form here. So you proposed a SWOT analysis, Hans. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
Facade, nice.
Yeah, hell yeah. So China, Elon's health was another one. Germany was another one, right, Kuba, that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about Twitter? How do we think about Twitter?
You can put it under
sale.
It's an opportunity. It might also be a threat.
Very double-edged.
Yeah, but I think after the last sale, it should be like less important. Hopefully.
And so from my side, like I'm generally less concerned about short-term stuff, right? Like to me, it's more around the existential longer-term threats that I'm concerned with, that, are either existential in nature or would result in a very subdued Tesla, right? That's not going to 5x, 10x, 50x. And so from my side, I often think about market saturation or limitation, in that, for example, just practical things like charging space. Like, for me, it's obvious. We've got a double garage. We can charge at home. But I don't know what happens to sales when, the early adopters where charging's not an issue, don't have, need to rely on superchargers or charging at work and so on. So there's a question mark for me around, so it's kind of limitations around market penetration, right? Other components of that would be, and again, I can argue against all these points, but let's put them in. The other one would be the product range, right? Is there a point where people do look for more variety and so on. The long tail on FSD. So is there a risk that FSD will get to 98% but won't really go beyond level 3 or 4 because of that long tail, and rolling it out to other regions, etc. is just going to take way too long.
I would call that FSD March of Nines.
Yeah.
Farzad.
Okay. Do we think FSD is an opportunity as well, or should we just treat it as specifically as a threat?
Yeah, definitely an opportunity. And I would say even if they can't fully complete the March of Nines, there's still a lot of upside opportunity in very valuable products that they can capture revenue from.
And then there was Andreas, you made also a point about markets, potential market saturation and the range of products. Do I have this sort of identified correctly on here?
I think call it early or premature market saturation, maybe, due to a range of potential factors, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that, and then I think the last one, it's the last one, but certainly one more I would add is, so failing to scale the energy business, right, for a host of reasons, right? Whether those are kind of technical in nature, like, the solar roof practicalities of scaling that, or whether it's just, it can become a very commoditized play. So we certainly here in South Africa, we're seeing a whole bunch of Chinese manufacturers, SunSync being a dominant one, that is just taking the market by storm because they got pretty decent software, decent APIs, very well priced. And so that it's not obvious to me how you can scale the energy business and it's not obvious, but and do so at a decent margin, right? So there's a margin threat and there's a scaling, a technical ability to scale threat.
And then a lot of people in the chat are mentioning materials as one.
Yep. So this is lithium, nickel, all the different raw materials, right?
Yep.
For the batteries specifically. Okay. There's actually, we might be building out the best crowdsourced bull, like bear, sort of like, just a SWOT analysis of the company as we go through this document. And the comment sections definitely throw stuff out there that you think should apply to one of these things. Right now we're focusing on weaknesses and opportunities, I think, mostly. And I think we should start there because we can all probably rattle off the strengths from the top of our mind when we're sleeping. So, and weaknesses as well. How do you guys think about service? Like the service network for Tesla?
I wouldn't put it as a strength. Yeah.
Okay. So I heard strength and weakness. What are we saying?
No, I say it's not. I wouldn't put it as a strength. Yeah, I would say maybe an opportunity because I don't know that I would call it a weakness, but
to me, I agree. It's an opportunity. I think it's a short-term. Maybe it's a short-term weakness, but long-term, I'd say it's an opportunity because and we can get into why, but yeah.
Yeah, we've danced around it a bit, but let's just make it tangible that this is a long-term SWOT, that we're not going to worry too much about short-term things.
So I did hear Kuba say it's a weakness. Why do you think it's a weakness?
Well, I'm looking for anything that I can call a weakness. Service was the first thing that came to mind.
Be objective.
Well, let's try and just quickly put that to rest. Whether my view is this: I think everyone will struggle with service. It's new product line, new skills, new. So I think the existing. So I rate service in relation to what the other OEMs would be doing. As electric ramps up, I think Tesla will inherently be ahead of the curve. But importantly, my view is because of their philosophy to not make money off service, they will innovate in that space in a way where they will drastically minimize service costs. And their tight integration will help them innovate in that space, right? They will easily analyze service issues and make changes throughout as upstream as necessary to mitigate them. So in the long term, I'd say it's a massive opportunity. In the short term, yeah, we know there are varying degrees of issues around that.
I'm curious for y'all who are both international, like what is Tesla service experience internationally, and from your sense of things, how would you compare that to, some place like California where it's much more saturated?
Kuba, we don't have cars here. We have Powerwalls. I can comment on that. But do you have a view on the perception of?
It's not great because of scarcity, in terms of the scarcity of Tesla resources, because we have one service center for a country of 35 million people. And fortunately, it's quite close to me, so I'm not complaining. And we have one mobile technician who recently visited me. And he happens to live in the same city, so I'm lucky. But he is supposed to travel all around the country, which is like, I don't know, 600 miles and 600 miles, more or less, a square. So it's tough. It's tough because it's certainly under investment, and Poland is not a priority market for them yet. And we also see that with superchargers, where there's quite certainly not a lot. And this summer, traveling in Poland with an electric car is a pain because there's huge queues at the chargers.
Yeah,
I posted
we don't have, the vehicles haven't launched in South Africa. It will be a while before that happens. We do have Powerwalls. There's not that many. There is some local Tesla presence, but generally support is done remotely and largely out of the Netherlands, and it's done through installers, right? So to be honest, it's inconsistent, right? It's very much still like service and support. If you need support, is largely a function of the quality of your installer, more than so Tesla has less control over that, and they obviously try not to deal with end consumers because that's not the model and it's not scalable for them on the Powerwall side, and so you'd get inconsistent service depending on how good your installers are.
Actually, on that front, I think that might be a bit of a risk in the future because as you scale internationally, you choose the biggest countries, and then what is left is the smaller countries, and you have a bunch of smaller countries where you have to put a lot of effort, but there is not that many potential consumers. So it doesn't scale that well once you want to go for the rest of the world. So I'm thinking, for example, in Europe, in Central Europe, you'll have a lot of small countries. Well, I'm sure you have to put a lot of effort to comply with regulations and set up presence there, and it turns out there's only a couple of million people in each country, right?
Yeah, definitely a Pareto distribution of effort versus return on effort.
And sorry, this is pertaining to service specifically. I'm sorry, I may have missed a. Was it discussion?
Not only service, but I would shift
probably just infrastructure,
further expansion of with sales. Electric cars mostly, I think.
Yeah,
but maybe it won't be necessary in the near future. Maybe it's a more distant issue.
Did you see Bill had put a thread about fatalities on FSD?
Yeah. Exactly. I also think it's something should be included. So it's brand damage and due to FSD fatalities. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good one. There were a couple other ones that were thrown out in the comments, which I thought were great. Supercharger amenities, I think, is an opportunity for sure, like restaurants and whatever else they could add as a supplement to the supercharger. Let me make sure I give credit to the person that threw this out here. I did have it up earlier. Sorry, I forget who it was. I can't find it on the comments.
Roll off trash can pools.
Unionization was another one as well. That was brought up as a potential threat.
Yeah,
so the unionization of workforce. You guys agree with that?
Yeah.
That was a really good one. FSD fatalities, we just talked about. And then as far as you guys were talking about infrastructure build-up being a potential risk, is that something we want to identify here in some way? Or is that just more a point of discussion?
I mean, it's almost as much an opportunity as it is a threat. I would say it's probably opportunity, just global expansion.
So how
scaling.
does that, is that something that they do as an opportunity to grow the business, or is that a necessary step they have to do to grow? Or I guess it kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The threat for me there is regulation as a counter to, as an inhibitor to the expansion rate. Both on the factory side and especially on the raw material side, right? Which we know is a major factor. So, and it seems that at this point, regulation is not necessarily even getting easier, right? It could be getting worse. It depends. I don't know. I think it's up in the air. And ironically, the Green Brigade is perhaps contributing to that. But is it in Chile where they've made it more onerous to, I think, start up lithium mines? I think they've been discussing regulation that makes it more onerous for environmental reasons and so on.
There was somebody that threw out regulatory interference as the point. Does that kind of catch that umbrella, you think? Just regulators just stepping in and just screwing stuff up anywhere? Or do we want to get more specific?
Yeah, I think it makes sense because it's multiple fronts, right? So it's, as Andreas mentioned, on the raw materials side, also on the energy side, on the FSD side, certainly.
Even
so
insurance.
Fronts. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm reading through the comments here. There was a quick super chat here. Gary, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. It looks like the question's off topic, so maybe we'll take a second to answer it. But you guys obviously don't have to super chat, but if you are super chatting, if you can keep it to the topics discussed, would be awesome. Anything on lobbying FCC to prevent Dish from hoarding 12G channels and therefrom killing Starlink? I'm not well versed enough in this, but the way I think about that is Elon knows how to navigate these sort of environments, and if he wants Starlink to work properly, he'll figure it out. So I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts around that, but that's how I think about it.
I think for Starlink and for SpaceX, I don't think it's an existential risk, but it can be an inhibitor. I suspect that affects the US market only, so it's not all of Starlink, I suspect. I think it can be an inhibitor. I don't think it's an existential issue for SpaceX. I'm pretty sure, like Starlink raises funding, right, for SpaceX to allow them to move faster. I think he would find funding even if Starlink wasn't a big contributor, but it could slow things down, make things more painful.
One of my just very high level impressions of that situation is that upset a lot of different apple carts, not just Starlink and SpaceX. So I know that companies like Amazon were also impacted by this. And I think that the number of players who are arrayed against Dish Network in this is much larger than Dish, and the likelihood that they can overcome or lobby the government to successfully take that bandwidth is low.
Real quick, I'm fleshing out some of the points under the threats. So for China, we're talking specifically about the China-U.S. relations souring, right? When we're thinking about that threat and how it impacts the Gigafactory there. Kuba, you mentioned Germany. I just want to make sure I fully understand. So how is Germany specifically a threat to Tesla?
The risk is that with the war in Ukraine, Russia might block resources, specifically natural gas, and Germany is the biggest user. And so they are preparing for some pretty bad scenarios in the winter, if the gas stops flowing. And they'll certainly, one of the steps they'll have to take is to stop industry, and possibly I think they'll first stop Giga Berlin before stopping Mercedes or BMW factories.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that.
So I can see that being a risk for sure. It would be short term though, presumably, right, rather than a long term.
Yeah, but what you can have is you can have a double whammy, because you can have a deterioration of China-US relationship at the same time, and then you end up with just 2 domestic factories.
Yeah,
that would be really bad.
It could be a catalyst. Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think these things can become more significant if they compound or they happen simultaneously. Like any one of these in isolation, I don't think we'd worry about. But if 2 or 3 or 4, and then the share price gets knocked, and then it affects stock options, and it makes Tesla more vulnerable. So there can be a vicious cycle that gets created.
I would love the fleet hack to be a problem that we really need to seriously worry about, because that means that we are in an era of massive profitability that will be able to fund any fleet hack mitigation strategies that need to occur.
Is that almost too far reaching, or do you think it's a legitimate long-term
threat? I think it's a legitimate long-term threat.
I mean, again, I don't think it's existential, but I think it is. I think the likelihood of that is quite high. I think the impact can vary depending on severity and so on. So I think that's a really good point. The one I would add, Farzad, is it's a bit weird, but it's like I think the likelihood's low, but it's not unfeasible. It's like a large-scale coordinated effort, last effort from the remaining players in the oil industry, in the vehicle industry, to collude and get together and fund a massive attack on Tesla, right? At a scale that's significantly larger than we've seen now, right? I mean, the likelihood that they can get their act together to do this on a large scale is very small, but desperation might lead to that, right?
Yeah, Rodman brought up basically a similar point in the chat. And when you think about it just in terms of the oil industry and companies currently being disrupted, it's more isolated. But as Tesla continues to grow and expand the markets that they're disrupting, that pool of the disrupted grows and grows as well. And so now you see people like Dan O'Dowd and people in the software space who are also feeling this competitive threat. And so I do expect for this pool of basically fudsters to continue to grow linearly with Tesla's product growth.
Got it. What else? Somebody brought up boring tunnels using designated FSD Teslas as an opportunity. What do we think about boring tunnel or boring company and Tesla coming together?
Yeah, definitely an opportunity. Many have put forward the idea that will be the first place that we really see the Tesla network operating on a full self-driving robotaxi network. I think that's possible, but you also have to take into account how fast the boring company is able to scale the number of tunnels that they have, and right now that's still pretty slow. So, but long term, it's definitely a huge opportunity.
I have
I'm seeing a lot of opportunities coming. Sorry, Kuba, go ahead.
I have an issue with Tesla that's bothering me a little bit, but possibly not huge because it can be rectified quickly. This is completely ignoring V2G, vehicle to grid, which I think is the future. And it frustrates me that I have at home over 120 kilowatt hours of battery, and I cannot use it to power my home. And I see that with the entrance of the F-150 Lightning, it might now hit mainstream, and I'm hoping that this would cause Tesla to reverse course on that, because it just wasted resources, and it's not like Tesla and Elon to tolerate that.
Yeah, that's a very Apple-like move. I think that's what they've done there, right? It's like, well, if,
Yeah.
if you want that feature, buy another product, right?
Mhm.
And I agree. Like I've heard Elon's view on that, and he's saying, well, it's a different use case, have a different product for it. But to your point, Kuba, like you got 120 kilowatt hours, you probably
Mhm.
consume your house consumes 20 kilowatt hours in a day. So that's like what 10% of your well, okay, maybe 15% of your battery,
Mhm.
just to give you backup for one day. It's
Yeah.
when you need it. So it does make the option value as a consumer of that would be significant. But yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, and especially, even just for emergencies, that would be huge. I don't have
Yeah.
to plug it in every day, but it would be good
Exactly.
to have that
Yeah.
peace of mind. With the complicated geopolitical situation, it will be really welcome.
Yeah.
Does anyone know if they can enable that through software, or does it require changes to their inverter system and so on?
I
I
remember that there was some discussion that it's a hardware thing in the plug.
at least in the
Yeah.
older ones, I don't know if they've updated that for newer models, but yeah, that's what I'm remembering as well.
Okay.
Certainly in case of CCS, because I don't think in Europe, because I don't think CCS is ready yet for two-directional transfer.
I have to ask you guys a absurd question, but without it's just purely a thought exercise without being judged on my morality. But let's say you set up a platform under the guise that you will be conducting a large-scale FUD effort, and so you set up a platform to receive funding in order to do exactly what that last point says. But you then end up using that money in reverse, right? Would that be unethical?
Some would say no. Given the nature of what those dollars will be put, that's a brilliant idea, man. Could you imagine? And the exposure, and then you would be able to expose who are the people that are willing to put up the
As
money
well,
to do
yeah,
that,
exactly.
right? Who's got the balls in the comment section to do that? Oh my god, that would be incredible.
It reminds me of what was the website that people used to go to have affairs, that the thing was the honeypot of all the
yeah.
cheaters that got hacked.
Right?
Yeah, and all those people got exposed.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Real quick, I ended the poll that was published earlier. I was asking if Tesla service is a weakness. 54% in the chat said yes. So I listed it as a weakness because the majority sort of ruled that it was. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, maybe what we can, I mean, once we feel we've exhausted this, maybe there's again just thought exercise. We can pick one or two, and we debate them. So someone argues against, someone argues for, and then we see if we can flesh it out. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that will work. But
Yeah,
it's a thought.
we can definitely try that. And then in the comment section too, because I am seeing a lot of opportunities and like strengths come through. Let's see if we can focus on weaknesses and threats exclusively. And I know it's hard because like literally I'm like already going like strength and opportunities, but see if we can all really focus specifically on what Tesla is either weak at right now, or what things could disrupt, i.e. threats, could really impact Tesla, and try really hard. We're trying to be the best Tesla bears on the internet, because we don't think that the current bears are doing that good of a job of highlighting actual bear arguments against Tesla. So definitely sit down and see if you can come up with threats that are not already listed on the sheet.
Yeah, one of the questions I have for y'all is like, how do you what's your sense of Tesla's ability to work with regulators in a non-antagonistic way? And is that a weakness?
Well, my sense, Hans, is pure speculation, is that behind the scenes, they work with regulators in a very constructive way. I think the way Elon at times can come across on Twitter, which can appear, but not always. I think he's shown respect as well for regulators. But my understanding is behind the scenes, they work very well with regulators, taking the lead, giving them the information they need in order to make the best decisions. Right? That's my feeling. It's hard to see practically what's happening there, but I think they work well. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's got a more informed opinion.
That's what it seems like from the effects that they've been able to get on the regulatory front. It's not been terrible, certainly. So they seem to know how to do it.
There's an interesting point here. No competition exists. Do you think this is a weakness, that there's a lack of competition, which means that Tesla could go even faster? How do you guys think about that?
I think that's such a good point, actually, because in the absence of competition, or being so far ahead of competition, goes back to how much is the business's ability to innovate driven by Elon, and how quickly would complacency set in if he's not driving it, given the fact that there is such low competition. Actually, it's a very good perspective, that actually.
I think that goes back to mission, that, he's done a very good job of installing that sense of urgency that is mission-based, not threat-based. That, the threat is just an existential global threat. It's not, hey, my competitor's coming to take my lunch money.
Yeah.
So Tesla Q's right, man. The competition is a problem for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It's
ironic. Maybe they've made it like this the whole
problem.
time. We're just, misunderstanding them. That this is what we mean when there's competition is the problem. This is an interesting one. People are buying and immediately reselling Teslas at a premium. Tesla's losing that money, being manipulated, short-term weakness. Yeah, we're focusing on long-term, SWOTs. So let's see if we can come up with ones like, say, 5-10 years down the road, or like a legitimate, even 3 years down the road, or even 2 years down the road. Yeah.
The biggest thing that we haven't really spoken to directly, we've talked about some specific things, but is that just macro environment risk that I think it was Freeberg who talked about it in last week's All In podcast. Like, there's so many little bitty risks all over the place, and the likelihood of any one of those things happening is not very high. But then in aggregate, when you have so many of them, the likelihood that 1 or 2 or 3 of them will actually occur, and then with the way that everything is so interconnected, the cascading effects of any 1 or 2 or 3 of those macro risks is pretty significant. And that's kind of the place that we're in, that we've had a system that has been building up systemic risk in the globalized world order. You can get things like the food crisis that's going to really become more and more and more of a problem over the next few months. What does that set off? What kind of instability does that create? And then how does that cascade through a global supply chain?
Got it. So something like compounding macro risks, I guess, is that the best way?
Yeah, because we've been in an era of globalization. We outsource so many critical things for infrastructure, and every country does this. So there are very few countries that are self-sufficient enough to where they don't severely depend on other economies, other nations, other suppliers. And then when that supply then gets disrupted, it really can create not just a problem, but as we've seen throughout the past 2 years, a cascading series of problems that is really hard to predict the outcome of or the severity of.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
The other issue that's come from the comments, and actually potentially ties into that, well, depending on the timeframes, is what happens if Optimus is successful and threatens job security, and that can catalyze massive political movements against Tesla, right? So again, if that's not managed carefully, it could create the same effect as FSD fatalities would have, but at maybe even at a much larger scale.
I would even lump FSD in that as well, because you know a lot of people drive for a living, and if a robot's doing it at a tenth of a price, and all those drivers get put out of work, truck drivers is one of the most.
Trucking industry the largest single employer in the U.S., right?
Yep.
4 million, 5 million, something like that. I don't know.
Exactly. Truckers, drivers, laborers, etc. A lot of jobs. A lot of jobs. What else?
It's a bit.
By the way, this is a great exercise, Andreas. This is like that was such a good idea. Such a good idea. We'll make this like known. Like we'll just share this document to everybody, and the bears can actually build Twitter, a freaking model.
I mean, what would be nice is to put this on a platform like a Reddit platform or something where there can be discussion around each point and things can be upvoted, and so each point can be fleshed out, right? That to me would be a nice. So it forms the starting point for more in-depth discussions on each one.
Yeah.
Is it a weakness that Tesla? It goes back to PR, but the weakness is they don't get recognized for the good that they are doing. Lives saved by FSD, CO2 emissions saved, and so it's I suppose the imbalance of good news versus the bad news, and the fact that there's money being spent on funding the bad news, but that there isn't a counterbalance. Yeah, I suppose it's lack of PR. Yeah, it's a take on that. Correct.
So not being able to maximize positive stories of Tesla, right?
Yeah,
like safety and
stories and more so. Yeah, exactly. The systemic good that it's doing.
It's almost like an audience arbitrage, because there are people who are profoundly affected by this and who share that, but then maybe they don't have the reach of being able to share that message that then creates opportunities, in the presence of FUD for that stuff to just get drowned out or not to get the recognition or the reach that it needs.
This one's a really interesting one. Tesla loses their mission focus, and somebody else brought it up earlier where the culture is going to be harder to maintain as it gets bigger. I think that's a really good point. Really good point.
Yeah, I think maintaining culture, so size, complexity, and mission dilution, resulting in culture dissipation, right?
I don't know if I would call it a threat, but something just that I want to continue to observe over time is, do they continue to maintain their pace of innovation, or do they begin to slow down and act more like, because I think that's one of the metrics that you can use to tell, is the culture still what it needs to be? Are they slowing down and acting more like the rest of their competition, or are they continuing to move at Tesla speed?
Yeah.
I mean, here's a question around that, Hans, which you see, the question is, would they go is the natural course that they'd go the Apple route, where Apple innovated in the early days, but established enough presence, reputation, quality, and now don't really innovate in terms of, they're not on the forefront of new features, but are really good at building in refined improvements across the ecosystem, right? And so is it a case where Tesla won't need to be the first or innovate in terms of these major new things, but can actually lag behind, but just do things really well because they've got an established market share and footprint and all that.
Apple.
Yeah, maybe eventually. I mean, that seems like so far away from now. Like there's so many product innovations that we know are still in the pipeline that I would think that you're talking at least a decade, if not more, before you even begin to get to that point where you're not talking about a stage where they're just innovating on product and being at the forefront of leading everyone else.
Yeah. Any other threats or weaknesses? Chat, panel?
It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but when all the Tesla bots get sentient, that's going to be a bit of a threat or an opportunity, or basically a event horizon for us.
Skynet.
We'll put that in bold because it could literally be the end of us all.
Yep. I mean, it's scary. And I guess the thing that Elon has embraced is like, well, if it's going to happen, it needs to hopefully be led by the most conscientious actor possible. And I don't see anyone else out there who's really taking that seriously. Although I would say I've been pretty impressed with all the interviews that I've watched by the team over at DeepMind and the way that they're thinking about these things. Google as a whole, I don't know, but at least the DeepMind team, I think, really takes these questions seriously. So,
yeah. Let's see. Non-Tesla breakthroughs that disrupt Tesla products, like newer energy innovations. Would fusion help or hurt Tesla? What would we need solar panels in this scenario? I don't know.
Prototypes are easy, production is hard. Like, even if we get the breakthrough, you still have to scale up.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I think it is really worth considering whether it's fusion or even fission around a disruption. I don't know if anyone listened to the interview with John Carmack and Lex Friedman, right? It was 5 hours, 10 minutes or something. It was an awesome interview, actually. It was absolutely awesome. And but John Carmack once, you know, in his sort of next phase of his career choice, he ended up he's looking to do generalized AI, but he was considering going down the fission route, I think it was, because his feeling is exactly what SpaceX has done to rocketry can be done in the space of fusion or fission. And it is rife for disruption because it's had this very regulated, traditional, non-innovative way of doing things. And so maybe, you know, in the next 5 or so years, there will be major breakthroughs there that could, impact how energy is generated, you know, reduce reliance on solar and wind. And storage.
In an event where that happens, you know, I think Tesla will still have very valuable insights in technology around the deployment and movement of energy throughout a grid system. Especially, you know, I'm not sure what the specific opportunities that they were talking about were, but if you look at a more distributed, instead of having large scale fusion or fission reactors, if you're doing the smaller scale ones and you have a lot more of them distributed throughout your grid, you know, Tesla's infrastructure for deploying power from distributed battery systems is something that could still be applicable.
And also, if it's in a few years' time, then Tesla will have so much money that they can jump in real quick and push it forward themselves.
There's an interesting, this one's an opportunity, but I thought it was an interesting one. Educating engineers, service, and factory workers are collaborating with trade schools, but could bring it internal and revolutionize. Thank you, Patrick, for the $5 super chat. I think what's interesting there is, you know, I always talk about how revolutionary I thought Tesla's approach of running a business was, and the things that I learned in there. They could make that into a class. Why not? You know?
And this is something I wondered about for, you know, I still wonder about it, I guess. Elon used to talk about how there's not a factory for good engineers, and the fact that a lot of they're growing and scaling, like they can only spend money as fast as they can put it to good use, and that is really gated by the amount of engineering talent that they have and the priorities of that team. So I've been a little bit surprised that we haven't seen more on this front, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's probably more like it's a testament to how difficult it is to do multiple things, right? Because it seems like almost like a low-hanging fruit in a way, but still difficult to do.
All right, I have to head out. It's been fun. I'll catch the rest of this episode and catch up on where I left off this
Sounds
afternoon.
good. Thanks, Hans. Appreciate you coming
Thanks for
on.
having me.
care.
Enjoyed it. Yep.
Yeah, same.
Thanks, Hans.
If there's
See you soon.
anybody in the Patreon or YouTube live community, if you're or YouTube community, if you're on Discord and you want to jump on and be our ringer, send me a message on Discord. And if you'd like to join us on these discussions, I should use that as a plug. Join our Patreon community or our YouTube community. Thank you very much. The Andres, Kuba, and Hans are all contributors, and it's one of the cool little perks that you get. So any other threats or opportunities that we want to hit?
What's been playing around in my mind is just looking at a factory. It doesn't have to be a factory, but certainly that's the most dominant thing right now, is as a cybernetic system, right? And the idea that you have technology and you have humans interplaying, and to me it feels that Tesla's got a different approach around. It's not just a case of people and technology, and technology helps people, but it's almost looking at it as a system where the system has to do certain things, technology's making decisions and doing things, and people are a part of it. And whether it's whether it's an algorithm or whether it's a human, it's almost like the mindset is the same thing. They just have different capabilities, right? So I know I'm not necessarily articulating this well, but to me, it seems like it's a different philosophical way of designing a system, and a complex system like a factory. And it does tie into the Joe Justice stuff, right? As to, the digital tools that people help to, but it's almost
the
like
DSM, digital self-management. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, but it's almost like, I mean, one has to be cautious how you word it, but it's almost like humans and machines are equally important at this point, right? It's not like one over the other. And you say, okay, I'm trying to achieve X. Do I use a machine? Do I use a human? Do I use a combination of the two, right? And it's a whole philosophy of, and it's interesting because, like, if you look at the definition of cybernetics in from scientific form, it's getting machines and humans to collaborate with each other to achieve an outcome, right? So anyway, I could be going down a rabbit hole, but to me, it feels that that's going to be massive, and it talks to the idea of manufacturing being a competitive advantage. And I suspect that same principle will be brought into service, right?
So you're talking about this as an opportunity where this sort of combination of technologies or approaches can be very revolutionary. So manufacturing will be an advantage. How does it do that through that cybernetic collective? And okay, got it.
Okay. I won't be offended if it sounds too esoteric or irrelevant.
No, I mean, I think that's when Elon says manufacturing will be Tesla's long-term advantage. I think this is specifically how it gets executed. It's high levels of automation, high levels of AI in the factory to try and predict things from happening, and then that assisting humans to do their jobs better. Yeah. How else would you get better in manufacturing? How else would that become a gigantic competitive advantage long-term versus anybody else? Is you're leveraging technology. Yet humans can only do so much. It would have to be that combination of those two. Come together for So I guess maximization of man and machine synergies. Cybernetic. Massive manufacturing.
Yeah, it can even get to a point where it's a bit of dystopian, that the humans are just the laborers that do what the AI tells them to improve.
Exactly. They're subservient to the machines, and they're just compensating for what machines aren't doing
humans
well.
initially, and then Tesla bots. So humans will not be needed in the end.
So it's almost like a threat and opportunity at the same time. It kind of, I think, goes into the one point we made about Tesla bot, a massive work displacement. I guess that already covers it, right? It's sort of like that one of the potential outcomes.
Self-displacement as well. Yeah, that's what we have to think about.
Yeah. Okay. So we're almost an hour in thinking about weaknesses and threats. How do you guys feel about this list? And the comment section as well. Anything else y'all want to throw out, or do we think this is a? I mean, what I find incredibly interesting about this whole discussion is that bears, like, how many of these points do bears actually talk about?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, that's
maybe this one.
Yeah,
that's a service.
Solar
but even
roof,
then, it's not on the forefront,
well.
right?
Right. This one we flipped on its head, which is actually very, very funny. They never talk about, I guess maybe they do talk about China and U.S. relations a little bit, because they're talking about how macro could impact them in a way, but it's not really at the forefront.
Something like that also impacts all other car manufacturers. So
Exactly.
That's partly why I think they don't focus on things that are considered widespread threats, right? In many respects.
Right.
Because they're not Tesla specific.
Well, I think Tesla has outsized presence in China compared to other US-based manufacturers, at least.
Yeah.
At the moment, at least, if you look at the capacity of factories, China is more than half, right?
Yeah. I'm looking through the comments to see if there's anything else. Due to fast growth, Tesla could spread itself too thin with worldwide resources, feedback from fringes rollout, the speed of feedback loop with new human capital. Yeah, we kind of have this covered a little bit under this one. Tesla loses mission focus as they get larger. The culture maintaining Tesla speed hurts, right? So I think it's a great one, Julio, but I think we do have it covered.
Yeah. And again, I think
we did.
It goes back. Sorry, go ahead, Kuba.
Sorry, Andreas. So we didn't talk anything about ESG, but I think it's been prominently discussed before, right? So I think it's clear to everybody. But you put it possibly from the comments, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, somebody dropped it, and that's so. This we're talking about how ESG masquerades. Basically, what's interesting about ESG is that it's primarily a funding resource or a mechanism that would allow Tesla to become either investable or be able to borrow money. But in a world where Tesla is self-sustaining from a cash perspective, like outside of it, like how would it truly impact Tesla? Like maybe if they need to borrow money, they might be in a really tough situation. But I do think it's a legitimate
or maybe
threat.
Maybe they will be. Maybe they, government and any big corporations will not buy Tesla cars, for example.
Yeah.
Because they are not ESG compliant.
Mm-hmm. Could be a long-term issue. I'll flesh this out a little bit after the stream, but okay. Anything else? Weaknesses, threats? 5. Should we put some background music? Let's see. We'll do some of this. See if we can. I wish I had like dun 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 dun. What's that one? The Jeopardy song or whatever.
Just grab a guitar, Assad, and see what you can come up with.
Okay. All right, I think we did pretty good here. So we're an hour into the stream. Do we want to pick one or two of these, like you said, Andreas, and see if we can debate them a little bit? Do we want to save that for a different discussion? How are you guys feeling from a capacity perspective? Are you guys comfortable? Or
We can try, although I feel like this exercise has already been quite taxing intellectually. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to do the exercise justice, to be honest.
Maybe
we can
let's
try.
take one. Let's take one and try,
Yeah.
right?
okay.
Just to see, because just to get a feel, since we're in it. I agree, it has been quite taxing, but maybe let's give one a shot. Just one.
Yeah. Okay.
Which one would you like to discuss?
Kuba,
And if
any
Yeah.
preference?
Got no preference really. Maybe which one was the most surprising to you guys?
So I know the PR one's always a point of discussion, and in the comment section, if you guys want us to discuss one, drop it down on the comments. So we're gonna try to pick one of the weaknesses and threats that came up, even opportunities, I guess. But let's see if we can do a weakness and threat to have a debate and see just how big of a opportunity or threat it is.
How about unionization? We discussed that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts about this one.
Why is that a threat for you guys? Because I think it's very interesting that we now have views from very different parts of the world.
Yes, true. For those that don't know, in the comments, so I'm in the U.S., Andreas is in South Africa, and Kuba is in Poland, right? Kuba, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's Poland.
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously we come from very different backgrounds and different, we're familiar with different types of governments. I'll kick it off because I'm actually I've made videos about this specifically. I think unions are they minimize at the core, they minimize innovation, because for unions to work in the States, they have to have very rigid and very specific type of a construct around how people work, i.e., people are they can't really switch jobs or switch roles within the job because the union says, well, you shouldn't be doing that because someone else is responsible for that, and if you do that, we can't track your progress, and we need to be able to track your progress so we can pay you fairly, so on and so forth. And it generates sort of this this culture at the workplace of minimizing work and maximizing how much you make, and you don't really have an incentive to go over and beyond what your role is to really make an impact for the company, because the union says, well, don't do that. Don't do that. That's not your job. We don't want to do that. We want to just have you focus specifically on what you have to do so that we can pay you fairly, and so on and so forth. So it's very anti-innovation in a way. For innovation to happen at companies, I believe you need to have a very open and free-flowing workplace where anybody from any background can come in and propose ideas and work on things, and that's how you make innovation happen. You can't just have one person focus on one thing because they get burnt out, and you need ideas to float around. So I think if unions were to say start driving the Tesla mission, then Tesla would stop innovating, like hardcore. They would not be able to innovate. They would not be able to change nearly as fast as they should, because the union would come in and say, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You're going too fast. We're not able to track the productivity of the workforce, and then they'll call for a strike. Yeah. So that's how I think about unions.
So Fassad, I think from my perspective, it's absolutely agree, and it doesn't require a big leap of logic to establish the counterproductiveness of unions. The question is, what is the probability, or under what conditions would Tesla unionize, right? And so it'd be interesting to explore that path. And so, for example, maybe the Biden administration is upset with Tesla for some reason. NHTSA is also a bit upset. We've got the Tesla FUD campaign going on, and there's a coordinated effort to really push unionization at the Fremont factory somehow, right? And they kind of get their way in one factory, in one area. Now, it's hard for me to paint a more credible way of how that would happen, and you might have perspectives. But if it happens in one factory, it could spread then, right? It could spread to Austin, to Berlin, and I don't know what China would be like, but it could then start. It could start becoming entrenched, and then all the downsides that you're outlining start becoming prevalent, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm curious to, like, what other mechanisms that could make unionization actually happen?
I think in California specifically, California tends to be very like I could see a world where California becomes sort of like a quasi, maybe like a Germany type place. Like I think Germany, doesn't every company over a certain size require to have like a union on its board or something? I might be incorrect, but don't they have union leaders at most of these?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if there's already some unionization going in Giga Berlin, from what I know about Germany. Hope maybe we have somebody
I saw
among the
Tesla
viewers
Fix in the
from Germany
comments.
who can tell us. Yeah.
Yeah, if
Because
Jan is on.
If unionization it will start in Germany, I think, for Tesla.
Yeah. So he said yes, that's correct. So, and then correct us if we're wrong, Jan, but does, what happened to my mouse is going crazy right now. So does Tesla already have a union in Giga Berlin? I'm guessing that's what the yes is for. So I could see that. I could see maybe California. I could jump on the call. Yeah, sure. Let's have you on, Jan, for help us understand the thing real quick.
The dynamics there, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I could, here, let me stop sharing my screen. How do I work technology again? There we go. I could see California becoming a place where they essentially force Fremont to somehow unionize in a way, or the conditions around that factory, I don't know, to somehow introduce a union, depending on where the state is going as far as like labor rights and whatever they decide those things are. That I don't see that happening in Texas at all. I don't ever see the Texas factory unionizing unless there is a dramatic shift in politics in the state and the type of people that live here. But it could very well happen in California. It could happen if Tesla decides to open a facility in, say, Toronto. I know Canada usually mirrors how California functions from a sort of labor perspective and a company perspective overseas as well. But yeah, it could happen in California. It could very well, and then they tried before, they tried, but they failed. So, but who knows? They could succeed later. I don't know, especially as a company grows. And we talked about that sort of, especially if Tesla loses its focus. And somebody in the comments section said, if the only way they would unionize if the workers are not being treated right at the factory, that could happen with as Tesla gets bigger and they lose track of the mission and treating their workers correctly. That very well could happen. Yeah.
How's Jan doing?
Possibly not in China, right? Yeah. I don't see China unionizing.
Jan, I just sent you the link for you to jump on. So Jan's going to jump on and he's going to help us understand the union situation in Germany a little bit as it pertains directly with Tesla. And then we're currently debating to see how legitimate of a situation it is that Tesla is becomes unionized over time, and that reduces the innovation capability of the company and its speed of change, so on and so forth.
While we wait for Jan, I have some interesting tidbit for you, some insider information about Giga Berlin. I don't think it's public knowledge yet that they started producing the long-range variants of Model Y. And I know because I had a test drive over the weekend in the Model Y, and it was a long range from Berlin.
Whoa!
And it was really, really well put together. I was surprised. I was trying to find any faults with it, but it was impeccable as far as I could tell.
Wow!
During the weekend.
Wow!
Breaking news.
Proper first-hand information. Have you let Rob Mauer know?
Not yet.
You should start Kuba daily.
Oh, you should definitely let Rob know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've not heard about it, because I was not sure if it's because it was clear that they started with performance models and long ranges to follow soon, but it seems that it started. Possibly they only, register them for Tesla themselves just for test drives for now, but maybe they'll start shipping them soon as well.
And you test drove this in Poland, the long range Model Y? Okay.
Yeah, in the only service center that we have in Warsaw.
Okay. And you're 100% it's from Berlin because of the VIN or whatever you were able to identify?
That's what the rep told me, and that also there was this parcel shop that they only do in Berlin.
Is that tied in any way to the sort of news around BYD starting to supply batteries to Giga Berlin? Is that somehow tied together, or is that a different thing?
I don't know. Not sure what sort of battery it had. Possibly not BYD because the capacity would be smaller. Hello.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Jan, your hair's looking great today, my friend.
Thanks.
What's going on over there?
That's why we had to wait for him.
Yeah,
I know.
exactly.
You had to put gel in his
was
hair.
at the barber shop. No, it's just because I don't have the big headphones. That's why my hair is more visible, I think. Yeah.
You
That's
are
my
pretty
go-to.
soft on your end. So maybe, let me see. Go ahead, say something real quick, Jan.
1 2 1 2 test 1 2.
Okay, that's better. I'll keep you there.
Okay.
For those that are not aware, Jan runs his own YouTube channel, Tesla Fix. Go check it out. Go subscribe. He talks about Tesla from a German's perspective, and he does a really good job. So big props to Jan. So Jan, we're talking about unions and how that could be a threat to Tesla from a innovation, speed of change perspective, ability to maintain its culture and mission. And we're discussing to see if it's the likelihood of unionization becoming more prevalent in Tesla, and also like how it would affect it. We kind of discussed that a little bit, but you have experience about Tesla and unions and the German culture, which is, from my understanding from our discussions, very pro-union. And so I'll let you riff from here because you're very good at talking. So go for it.
You have to understand that the system in Germany, we have a social economy. That's a little bit different from the economy in the US, for example. So social ideas are very important in the companies, and also like treat your workers right, pay them well. So everything is very regulated in Germany, as we know. So that's why they secure security, and securing everything is a huge deal in Germany, and taking risks is not really a culture thing that we do here. So that's why the unions are always on the table, more or less, in every company that gets bigger. So to a certain extent, if a company has more and more workers, I don't really know the number exactly, but then the unions get more or less relevant. And also we have the IG Metall, which is a huge union that also is very influential in the payment of the different companies. And it's more or less like this. If you have, for example, Mercedes, and they pay this amount of money, which was regulated with not regulated, but discussed with the union, then they, for example, if Tesla pays less than that, then Mercedes pays, for example, then the unions will start to pressure workers also in the company, like Tesla, to build a union there, and to get fair share of the pie, because other companies pay more. But if Tesla pays well, then this shouldn't be as much of a problem. So if they are more independent, more or less, if the workers are very content and they like their job there, then there should not be a problem. But it's not like in the US, like Amazon, for example, that really blocks unions. You cannot do that in Germany. That's absolutely a no-go. You cannot do that. We have very strict laws against something like that. For example, Amazon has videos where they say, oh, if you see people talking on the hallway, please be careful that they don't form unions for their managers.
You can't
saw
block
that
in the U.S. as well. Yeah, it's illegal to
Yeah.
block unionization in the U.S. It's just
but
yeah.
the topic in the U.S. unions are seen more are not as common as in Germany. In Germany, it's very embedded into the system, so
True.
you won't
True.
get you have to. Unions will be always a thing. You cannot really build a business in Germany without in that size without union influence, more or less. But if you pay your workers well and everything works just fine, and the workers are content and happy, then you won't have a problem. So, and I don't believe that many people want to really or have a problem with the working conditions there. Yeah.
Yeah.
As far
unions
as
a
I've
threat
heard.
to
If I can ask
so
you,
unions
Jan,
is a threat to
gi-
Tesla's
given what-
culture.
Go ahead,
Excuse me?
Kuba.
Okay.
My internet might be dying, so just tell me if I'm not clear. But the unions as a threat to Tesla culture in Germany are not that big a deal as in US, you would think. I don't know if you've heard Farzad's point on that. Because I understand that in Germany maybe they'll focus more on the pay, etc., just making sure that everybody gets a fair compensation, but not on this like strict division of the work, etc.
Yeah, I think it's a timing thing. The longer the company is moving, and the more the danger gets, because people get used to their pay grade and people get used to everything, and then after a while, but you have to imagine if a company really does bad stuff. For example, we have huge systemic problems with our railway system, for example. That's why they have more also strikes there in that regard. Or if workers really have a huge problem, then the unions say you got to go on a strike, and they really do that and organize that also. So our strikes are also organized by the unions, and they just say, okay, for 2 days we don't work on the railway, for example, and then everything stops for 1 day, and then they renegotiate their contracts, and then everything is fine again. And they always do that in a circle of around 4 years or something. But that's only if there's very much a huge pressure, and I could see a problem with the overtime, with the pushing to deadline stuff. If Tesla pushes too hard on the workers in Germany, that's not a good thing they should do. They should always find different workers that could jump in to take off the pressure. You have to be a little bit more social focused in Germany. It's very important to have a balance, but this could be a problem. If Tesla is pushing too hard to the workers, and some workers are not used to that could be a problem in the long run, I would say, because then they have to renegotiate contracts all the time. For example, there was a problem that the workers that went to Tesla at first, they had a pay grade, a special pay grade, or their pay grade that they had, and the newer ones that came had a higher pay grade. And something like that is very problematic in Germany. You have to adapt then the pay grade of every worker, because they're doing the same job for a different price, and that's a problem. And many companies just use third-party contractors, for example, to avoid something like that, because then they can just say, okay, your contract is done, you can go now, and then they avoid this problem. So they have a system to avoid something like that a little bit. So there are some tricks that you can do as a company, more or less, but it something like that is a problem. So just equality is very important. Equal pay, equal rights, equal everything like that is very important. So if Tesla is paying the same worker on the same line different pay grades, that would be a problem on the long run. So that's something they need to learn, I think. But they can adapt, I think. I think on the long run it shouldn't be as much as a problem.
Jan, if I may put a different take on this based on what you said earlier. Let's say, Giga Berlin ramps up, reaches steady state, and starts achieving fantastic margins, right? There's more automation, there's great processes, and they've got amazing margins. And they can actually start paying their workers a lot more than VW or BMW can, right? Does the system that you've described become a big problem for the other German manufacturers, where if Tesla's paying premium rates, it's
Could
going to
be.
put them at a big disadvantage now, because they are forced. They already have bad margins, and they are forced now to make them worse.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that could be a problem, because the industry, so the IG Metall, so the workers' councils in the companies, for example, or IG Metall, for example, the union, like a huge union in Germany, they really look at the market. If somebody pays better and workers are much more happier, then they start to push in the other companies more to get more leverage there. So they always use that, of course. Yeah, I can see
Nice
that.
Trojan horse strategy, Andreas.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, interesting, huh?
Yeah, it's complicated, because from an American perspective, it's so different. It's very strange to see that, because I could see one problem if Tesla would automate, for example, very many processes more and more. Let's say in 10 years or 15 years. So they have automated many things, and they all their workers more or less become obsolete, or more and more workers become obsolete. That is a huge problem. Getting rid of workers that have a contract directly with Tesla. If they are third-party contractors, it's no problem. That's why they implemented the system, so they get more flexibility with workers, especially in the meat industry, where they produce meat. There are very harsh contracts where it's like almost slavery, even in Germany, but that's a different topic. They are from different countries in Europe that just work in Germany for a certain time. They don't know the system. That's why they are a little bit screwed, and they're just third-party contractors. We have no influence on them, so that's how they shield themselves. So this system is always also in place, but directly, if somebody has a direct contract with Tesla, it's very hard to get rid of them, because in Germany we have harsh workers' rights, very strong workers' rights. Yeah.
First-hand info whether in Giga Berlin they employ directly or they use contractors? Do you know?
No, I don't really know about that, but I think they employ directly, and some contractors. I don't know the number. I'm not sure, but maybe somebody knows. Yeah, it's a mix, I think, because it depends on if it's low labor, more or less, or not so complicated labor. It's oftentimes third party. But if it's a little bit more complicated, then it's directly. And they also want to hold their workers. I think the first workers will be, the majority will have contracts with Tesla, I think. But that could be in the long run a problem. That's why Herbert Diess, for example, was kicked out of VW, for example, because he said in 2030, if we keep this pace that we are doing it right now, we're going to have to get rid of 20,000 workers in Wolfsburg 2030. And the Workers' Council was, excuse me, what did you just say? And so they were not content, and they have a huge say in VW also. Then they started, that's not 100% sure, but that's what I think, in my opinion, that what was happening. I have to clarify that. But so this is a problem. You don't fire people in Germany as easy. It has to be a long process, and the politics get involved very fast, because we have a social economy that's very tied with politics. So it's very, Okay, just an overview. Yeah.
That's really helpful. That's extremely helpful. I think the point that sticks out to me is within Germany is the rate of acceleration of automation and AI potentially displacing or minimizing the number of jobs that Tesla would hire for their operations could be a big red flag for the unions there that says, hey, manufacturer, how come you're only hiring, how come you are letting go of or only hiring a fraction of the percentage of workers that BMW or Mercedes or somebody else is hiring? You are, I don't know. Could that be a situation where they're just like, you're automating too much, or am I not thinking about this right?
I wouldn't say that. I never heard of a scenario that got into that direction, but you have to see that it's just way slower to get rid of workers. So the problem is Tesla has to ramp up. Not every process is automated, so they need workers, for example. And then they just ramp everything up, I hope they use third-party contractors, because then it's not as much as a problem to if the contract is done and everything is automated again, or the ramp went well and everything is fine, then they could shift the workers away again and automate more. But in Germany, everything is just a little bit slower in that regard. So you can get rid of, or you can like fire people, but very slow, and it's very complicated. And people can also sue the company, for example, if it's not legitimized to stuff like that. Yeah.
But in a world where, so the Berlin staffing model right now, say they have, I don't know, say they're at 2,000 workers, 3,000 workers. I don't know what the number is. Let's just say 3,000 workers.
I think it's more. I think, yeah, 5, around, I think five or more.
Let's use 5,000.
Sure. Yeah.
But in a world where Berlin has 5,000 and they're, their built out capacity right now, let's call it 200,000 cars a year. Let's say they haven't reached 500,000. They're able to reach 500,000 through automation with 5,000. Then they can reach 1 million. Then they can reach, 1.5 million as automation and robotics and all this stuff advances. That's not necessarily going to trigger a red flag to the unions that says, hey, this company is not hiring enough people or being unfair to the labor force. As long as they're not firing people, it's not going to be an issue. Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah. No, I don't think so, because innovation is innovation. You cannot stop that. Every politician would agree.
That would be very anti-German, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see, the scenario where there's a core group of people around the existing ramp up to 500,000, let's say, but because Tesla is going to continue expanding the factory to 1 million, 1.5 million, they can build in efficiencies, but still use this core group of people to do the additional 500,000, and maybe even need some more, but they don't need to double. They can, and as long as I think they can continue to expand that factory, they can build in the efficiencies in terms of cars per person, but without needing to retrench anyone.
And I wanted to add one thing there that is also maybe helpful for this discussion, is that Tesla wouldn't have made it this far if it was founded in Germany. I have to say that very directly. So because it's like agility, the agility is not as to make a company agile here is very hard to do because of all the regulations. But the advantage that Tesla has now is they can innovate in America, they can innovate in China, and then they can take these innovations and put them into the German system before they reach this critical mass of massive workforce. So they will reach a saturation point, I think, with technology and workers. So they don't have to fire people maybe, because they want to ramp to 20 million cars. So you need a lot of workers. So that's that. I think it looks good in that constellation, because they innovate in different countries, but not in Germany. In Germany, it's good for processes, for example, for efficiency on the line, for example. That's something that German engineers can bring to the table. And also, if they adapt a little bit, maybe they can bring new ideas. Also, Germans are very innovative. I have to say that. Also, that's not like only in the US there's innovation, or only in China, but German is very good at quality control and stuff like that. So they can bring innovation there also, or efficiency on the table. But but the core innovation of AI and stuff like that will happen in the US, and this will be exported to Germany or imported to Germany to the factories there. So I think this shouldn't be an issue on the long run. The innovation and stuff like that.
Jan, how easy is it to fire people in Germany due to non-performance? Because I think the case seems quite clear that Tesla that the current workforce, the numbers at least, are going to be safe. You'll need the numbers and maybe even more. But the question is, if they've hired too quickly and they don't quite have the level of skill that they need for the longer term, and they need to go through an exercise of improving the quality of the workforce. What does the law make provision for there?
It's like that. You have to imagine the German government gives a lot of money because we have the like nearly every person in Germany pays more or less 30% tax or 40% tax, and or even more, 45% tax, for example. So there's a lot of tax money inside of the German system. They have a lot of cash and or money, and they use the money to incentivize. For example, they incentivize stuff like if you want to expand your factory, for example, the battery factory, because Tesla wanted to build a battery factory there. They had they got money from the European Union, for example, also, and stuff like that happens. But in Germany, it's like this: they give you money or they help you to grow the company, but they also demand that you are careful with firing people, for example. So that's a thing, how the system works. They secure their workforce in the country, so the social structure doesn't collapse. That's why they need the workers, because they pay taxes. That's also a thing. So they like companies that have a huge workforce, for example, because they all pay taxes. And but the thing is, to get onto your question, because I'm just swifting around a little bit, as always.
So German.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that you. Okay, I have to rethink. Okay,
how hard is it to fire people?
For non-performance. So
for
if you up the
okay.
standards can you replace the workforce for non-performance or a portion? Obviously,
you can do that, but it's more or less like this. You have 3 strikes. Yeah, you have 3 strikes, and and you need really legitimate reasons. If you have wishy-washy reasons, you have to say, look, he didn't show up to work on that and that day. Then you have a review with your worker, and
we think about that comment.
Okay, yeah, that's right. You if your contract is fresh, then it's easy, because you have a time, for example, half a year or 3 months, for example. They're on what is it called?
Probation. Probationary employment.
Yeah, probation period. Yeah. Yes, then it's very easy to fire people in the first year, and that's why you don't get long-term contracts, more or less, because they want this flexibility to fire people. That's correct.
It sounds similar to South Africa, actually, because we have the same thing. There's a 3-month probationary period, and then non-performance. It's very onerous to prove non-performance, and as an employer, you have to be very thorough, and you also need 3 strikes. And as you say, you have to be very objective about that. The expectations of performance are very clear, measurable. And a very clear process, and you also have to demonstrate that you've supported the employee, right? You got to show that you've done this in the spirit of improvement, right?
Yeah, we talked to him 3 times, but he didn't react, and so that's similar. Yeah, I would say it's like that.
Yeah, what's interesting about the States is that sort of structure is different state to state. So, for example, when we're in Pennsylvania, you didn't really have to give notice. You can just, you have somebody on for a year, you'd be like, thank you very much. The nice thing to do would be to give, be like, hey, here is a severance or whatever. But you could basically, lay off folks. It was a right to work, I think it was called. It was a right to work state. California, it's very different. California, you have to give severance, and there's like a bunch of different things that you have to do to ensure that doesn't happen. Now, companies in general, especially larger companies, are they try to be as fair as possible. So they they give your warnings, your verbal warnings, your written warnings, so on and so forth. So it's very similar in that structure. The larger the company gets, but it's very different state to state. It's definitely a fascinating discussion. So if we think about to try to close out this discussion here, so as it pertains to unions, do we think that it's a threat based on everything that we've talked about? I know Kuba had to drop off, but do we think there's still a threat for Tesla, A, for them to take over, and B, for them to actually become a threat. So slow down the company in any way, become hurtful. Any thoughts there?
Facade, may I offer a comment, because I do need to drop off, and if I may
Please.
offer a comment. It sounds to me that within the German context, it's less of a threat for that matter, because it sounds like there's an established unionized process that's very much based on principles of fairness and so on, and it's less driven around overly dominant unionized agendas. It's just trying to ensure there's a balance and fairness, and it sounds like that's kind of in place already. So and that Tesla's growing and operating within those parameters. And so it seems to me the chances that would get destabilized or move to some unproductive extreme is highly unlikely or unfeasible. So it sounds like a healthy balance is already kind of in play that's unlikely to be disrupted, unlike the potential situation in the US.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I would have to agree with that. I do. There is a Jonathan here I want to give a shout out. So protecting and giving workers' rights isn't anti-innovation. Unions aren't the threat; they are good for workers. 100% agreed. 100% agreed. The problem is that, at least from my experience in the United States, the unions, from my experience, that's what they market, but that's not what they actually do. Right. And we can have a 2-3 hour long discussion about this, because there's different unions and different unions operate differently. It all depends about the incentives that the unions are creating in those workplaces and how that impacts the company's ability to execute against their plans, especially if the company is built around a culture of really fast moving innovation. And especially if they take care of their workers. Right. So in the thought process becomes what sort of forcing function the union will create once they exist. Right. And the discussion around this is, okay, how does this impact Tesla? My argument is if Tesla does become unionized, A, that means that Tesla has stopped taking care of its workers. And then B, once the union takes hold, they'll quote unquote start taking care of their workers, in my opinion. But the ability for Tesla to be as fast as they were essentially becomes obsolete. Like, forget about it. That facility is not going to move as fast as it used to. It's just not going to happen. Unions do not cultivate that sort of culture.
Gentlemen, do you mind if I drop off?
Please do. Yeah,
stage?
Please do, Andreas. Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thanks, Andreas. Bye bye.
Great to meet you, Jan. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Andreas.
Bye-bye.
Great to meet you too. Bye.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something for that.
Please do.
Just one thing. I have to clarify something. So we have unions in the worker council. Worker councils are inside of the company, and unions are more or less outside of the company. And that's very important. But some people, some workers in the company are union members, for example. For example, from the outside, from the union from the outside, from the IG Metall, for example. So that's important to see that. But for example, VW, they made they have a workers' council to have somebody represent the workers inside of the company to see their demands. Then they discuss everything. So that's a good idea how to deal with it, because the union itself doesn't really see inside of the company, and that's a problem. If they just say more wage, but they don't see the macro strategy of the company. But the workers' council will see the macro strategy, so they can adapt. And I think something like that would be very helpful at Tesla also, because if the workers are working good together, they are content, they like their job, then they won't put their foot on the brake pads or something like that.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So
100%.
that should be a strategy that Tesla also should do. Like in Germany, it makes sense. It really makes sense, especially at Tesla.
And you can also make an argument. It also makes sense in the U.S. too. Like, the fact that I go back to my original point. Like, unions exist because companies weren't taking care of their workers. That's the only reason why unions exist in the first place. Is the companies were treating their workers extremely poorly, and unions arose out of a need to ensure that workers got proper rights. Right. But in an environment where companies are by and large, I would argue, doing a decent job at that. Of course, there's a lot of folks out there that aren't. But in an environment where companies are doing a great job, what is the function of a union, right? And just having a union for union's sake, I would argue, is like Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Jan. This we got you in as the ringer for the German perspective as always. Thank you very much for
I've
doing
heard
that.
you were talking about the German stuff, and I'm like, also the
Yeah.
ESG. I'm like, oh no, Farzad, it's a little bit different. And I typed this.
I love it. No, I love it. And I really appreciate your viewpoint. And of course, in the comments section, I always find that the discussions around these community forums are super respectful by and large. And we're very open to opposing ideas. This is why we're doing these things in the first place. This whole panel turned into, let's talk about the bear thesis the whole time. And we try to become Tesla bears for an hour and a half. So, this is the lovely thing about this community. But, thank you for coming on, Jan, and being our ringer. Hans, Kuba, and Andreas, who we've all lost on this forum because they've had different things going on. Yeah, but thank you all very much for joining as well. Thank you, everybody in the comments section, for being part of the discussion. Here's the link to the document that I've put together, which collected all the different points that we've talked about. Anyone with the link can view, and we'll do that to make sure nobody deletes everything by accident. So here's the link to the document, to the Word document that you can view on your computer. We've started creating a SWOT exercise, which is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we focus very hard on coming up with weaknesses and threats that Tesla could face, because we feel that the Tesla bears are focusing on the wrong things. And let's be objective about what are the real threats and weaknesses for Tesla. And the reason why the strength section is empty is because all of us in our sleep could rattle off 100 of them, right? So it's not because we feel there's no strengths, is that we know what the strengths are. We're Tesla bulls, right? So we try to do an opposite exercise. Hopefully it is helpful. If anybody has any ideas on how to make that list as easy to access as others, I don't own this information. Do whatever with it as you'd like. If y'all want to use this as a way to create a website where people can go in and add their ideas or add to that list, please do. And this is just, again, these forums are really a way for all of us to sit down and try to understand where we're going, like what's happening, what's going on in the next couple of years. And of course, we focus on Tesla and Elon Musk mostly, but that's because they impact so much of our society nowadays. And it's a good starting point for us to have that discussion. So make sure you check out that sheet. I'll also share it on Twitter for everybody to see. And yeah, Jan, thank you for jumping on. Thank you for everybody viewing. And if you have any last words, go for it. Plug your channel.
Yeah, one question.
Oh, where'd you go? Why'd you go dark all of a sudden? Jan, you just went dark. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay.
There we go.
No, my Apple Watch just reacted and started to take my microphone away.
Okay, go for it.
No, I just wanted to add, because of the ESG discussion, it's very complicated, and you were a little bit struggling to figure out what really was going on with the ESG, because it's a complicated topic. I would recommend you hop to my channel, to the interview that I did with Alexandra Merz. She is Tesla Boomer Mama. You might know her. Just jump to the last quarter, I think, of the episode. Then there she explains it in detail, again, and very short also. So you can check that out, because it's about regulation. That is the problem. If the regulators take these data points that they implemented in the ESG, which are stupid right now as it is, yeah, it's something about that, but you could check it out. It's more detailed there. I just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. So check that out, and check out Jan's channel as well, Tesla Fix. Go look it up. I was on his channel twice, and we had both discussions were great. The last discussion we had was awesome. I really enjoyed that discussion.
Me too. Yeah. It was awesome.
It was great. Yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
You made me feel so comfortable, and I was like ranting for minutes at a time, and that was fun.
yeah, and you were so close with your thesis. That's what I wanted to add there, because it's so crazy that we are so close to putting everything into one sentence, because we crunch the numbers, we look at everything, and the thesis is more or less starting to unfold now. You summed it up in the last episode very well. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. And of course, man, your perspective is always so valuable to the community. One we missed for a long time, and we finally have with our awesome German Tesla commentary guy with some of the best hair I've ever seen, by the way. So much good hair in the Tesla community. It's crazy. Fabrice, I just allowed comments, so do feel free to go in and add comments to that sheet as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a good idea with the comments. Yeah.
For sure. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next week. We have a lot of good stuff coming on. Next week, for those that are on, we will, waiting to confirm, but we're going to have a bunch of different folks on the channel. We're going to have people from the Ford Mach-EV vlog. I've invited them over for a Tuesday discussion, just waiting for confirmation, but I do think that's going to happen. We also have Tesla Boomer Mama on Wednesday as well. She's going to be joining us to talk.
Cool.
And again, I still need to confirm, but we have had this on the schedule. James Dauma on Thursday. So that should be fun, right? So we're going to pick his brain on a lot of different things, but we'll confirm with him to make sure that's the case. But he's on the schedule to come. As we get closer to the date, we'll release that YouTube Live. If it gets moved, no problem. But he is slated to come on the channel. So look out for that. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody. And end broadcast.